This story begins by showing a woman named Siu Hae-sung, and she had a pretty wild dream. In this dream, her husband was up to do the unthinkable. In reality, Hae-sung and her husband weren't getting along too well. She found out that her husband had been cozying up to a lawyer named Jin Yoo-hee. Things got even messier when her husband, Kang Nam-sik, told her he wanted a divorce because he had fallen for another woman. Hae-sung didn't like that idea at all because she didn't want their high school daughter to be all sad about their breakup. But Nam-sik was pretty determined to split up, and after thinking it over for a while, Hae-sung finally said okay to the divorce. She didn't want to live with a guy who was in love somewhere else. However, karma caught up with Nam-sik. Yoo-hee started avoiding him, and she even took off with the money he had invested in her. Now, Yoo-hee was begging Nam-sik to come back to his wife and call off the divorce, and Yoo-hee also accused him of stealing relief funds. She even said Nam-sik sexually assaulted and blackmailed her. And to make matters worse, the company found out about these shady activities and decided to investigate him. His job as an executive director was hanging by a thread. One day, Yoo-hee ran into Hae-sung and right in front of her, claimed that Nam-sik had sexually assaulted her and threatened to marry her, even though she didn't want to get hitched. Yoo-hee's statement left Hae-sung totally baffled, because as far as she knew, her husband and Yoo-hee were in love with each other, which is why he wanted a divorce. Nam-sik, who was speechless, could only say that none of it was true, and he was being falsely accused. That night, Nam-sik tried to calm himself down, but he'd lost everything. His job, his family, all his stuff, and even his savings had disappeared into thin air. Plus, his reputation was in the gutter. So he decided to call his wife and say sorry one last time. He owned up to his mistakes, thinking that those mistakes had pretty much wrecked his life. He told her to take good care of herself and their kid, and then he said his goodbye. Hae-sung, with a bad feeling in her gut, rushed to her husband's office, but it was too late. Nam-sik had decided to end all this pain. A few days later, Yoo-hee was spotted at a matchmaking agency called Rex. It was like super famous in Korea and had all these fancy people in its lineup, like conglomerate members. Just to join, you'd had to cough up a big chunk of cash. There, Yoo-hee was on a hunt for her next target, some high-up guy. After her husband passed away, Hae-sung had to start working to support her daughter. She knew she needed a better job than the one she had. So she decided to apply for an assistant professor position and reached out to a guy she knew for help. But this guy, he tried to take advantage of her. On her way home, Hae-sung bumped into her former lover, Cha Sub-jin. Turns out they had a romantic relationship in the past, but something happened, and they had to split up. The scene then showing the CEO of one of the largest IT companies in Korea. He is also ranked as the 30th wealthiest person in Korea. It is rumored that Lee Hyun-ju has gone through a divorce, and he has custody of his son. Being alone for too long, his mother registered him with the matchmaking agency Rex. Due to his assets and wealth, he ranks high on the Rex membership list. However, Hyun-ju is not actually ready to remarry. But because of his mother's wishes, he tries to find a future wife who can take care of him and his son. The criteria for his potential wife are quite simple. A girl or widow who is 30 years old or younger, and most importantly, someone who can engage in good conversation. After becoming a widow, Hae-sung's mom secretly signed her up with a matchmaking service. Hae-sung wasn't thrilled about it, as she wasn't ready for a new relationship. Her mom went to great lengths, even selling her jewelry to cover the pricey 10 million won membership fee. One morning, Hae-sung decided to visit Rex to ask for a refund for the fee her mom had paid without her consent. She insisted that her mom had made the membership purchase without asking her first. Coincidentally, Yoo-hee was at the same place, seeking matchmaking advice. She tried to bribe her consultant to set her up with Hyun-ju. After their consultations, Yoo-hee accidentally bumped into Hae-sung, causing a vase of flowers to crash to the floor. Hae-sung initially thought this encounter with Yoo-hee would be the end of her troubles, but little did she know, it was only the start of a brewing conflict. But when Yoo-hee spotted Hae-sung, she quickly left the area. CDO Choi Yoo-sun remained unaware of the situation they both faced. Afterward, Hae-sung talked to her consultant, an executive director who used to be a university lecturer. Currently, Hae-sung works at an academy and has a high school-aged daughter. Right now, Hae-sung is a platinum member of Rex. Just to give you an idea, Rex members are grouped by their wealth. The black category has members with over 100 billion won. Secret members have 100 billion won, and platinum members have up to 50 billion won. Yoo-hee herself is a secret member with 100 100 billion won in wealth. Outside the building, Yubi waited for Hae-sung and warned her not to speak ill of her. Feeling suspicious, Yubi contacted her consultant and asked if Hae-sung had been saying negative things about her. Kim Jae-sun confirmed this by checking with the consultant who handled Hae-sung. After verifying, Jae-sun informed Yuhi that Hae-sung had not said anything about her. Since her husband passed away, Hae-sung had to rent an apartment and live there with her daughter because their house and all of her husband's assets had been taken. Now, even paying the apartment rent was a struggle for Hae-sung. On the other hand, Seok-jin was in a hurry to see his seriously ill mother in the hospital. His mother had asked him to confront his former husband or Seok-jin's father and assert his rights as a child. Seok-jin's father had a history of domestic violence, and Seok-jin's youth was marked by witnessing constant fighting between his parents. That was the reason for their divorce, and custody had been granted to his mother. Seok-jin's father's name was Choi Young-won, and he had since remarried, with his wife being Choi Yoo-sun. That evening, Seok-jin went to his dad's house to fulfill his mom's last wish. He told his dad that he would now live with him and his stepmom. Young-won, who was very sick, was really happy to hear this. They narrowed down the choices to 5 smart and educated ladies who could potentially become Hyungju's wife. Most of them were from the Diamond Group, but one person from the secret group made the cut, and that was Yuvi. On the flip side, Hae-sung went to the matchmaking agency to replace the vase she had accidentally broken. She officially became a Rex member now. She also wanted to change her personal consultant to Kim Ji-sun to gather more info about Yuhi. Sadly, her request was denied, and she had to stick with her current consultant. Yuhi thought Hae-sung was plotting against her and wanted to talk to Yoo-sun directly. But she only spoke with black members. Elsewhere, Yoo-sun had a meeting with Go Aran, a high-ranking government official. Aran wanted to bribe Choi Yoo-sun in exchange for releasing the land they were on, with the condition that her daughter, Jung Mi-jin, would become Hyungju's wife. On the same day, Hae-sung received good news that she had become an assistant professor. At the same time, Yuhi walked into the room. It turned out that Yuhi and the previous professor already knew each other, and Yuhi had recommended Hae-sung for the assistant professor role. Yuhi warned once more that if Hae-sung badmouthed her, she could lose the newly acquired position and reputation. Meanwhile, Yoo-sun had plans to throw a secret party with 20 upper-class men and 20 upper-class women. Everyone would wear masks and pick their partners randomly. They'd reveal themselves at the end of the event, all in the name of matchmaking for Rex members. Yoo-sun also invited Hyungju to the party as an exclusive member. Initially, Hyungju declined, thinking it was a waste of time and not his style. But with a little encouragement and a reward from Yoo-sun, he eventually agreed to attend. One day, out of the blue, Hae-sung's daughter, Kang Min-ji, showed up at Yuhi's office and asked to talk. Min-ja already knew that Yuhi was involved with her dad and that Yuhi had recommended her mom for the assistant professor job, thanks to a phone call she overheard. Min-ji wasn't happy about Yuhi interfering in her family matters. She told Yuhi to steer clear of her mom and her family, even calling her a home wrecker for her dad. In the heat of the moment, Yuhi made up a terrible lie to Min-ji, claiming that Min-ji's dad had done something terrible to her. Min-ji was shocked to hear this false accusation. Afterward, Yuhi immediately got in touch with Hae-sung and told her that Min-ja had come to her and made threats. Hae-sung was confused and worried that something bad might happen to her daughter. She started looking for Min-ja in various places, but couldn't find her. Finally, she got a call informing her that Min-ji was at the police station. Min-ja had been found near a bridge, and the police had brought her to the station. In reality, Min-ja had met Yuhi because she was afraid that what had happened to her dad might happen to her mom. Min-ji didn't actually believe Yuhi's accusations about her dad. She was just shocked by the false claims. This is seen then showing Yuhi's childhood. She was the child of Sun Pil-young and Kim Yun-sin, but her dad never acknowledged her. Instead, Pil-young chose to live with his mistress, who Aran, and left his family behind. Now, Pil-young was living with Aran and a daughter they considered their own, Jung Mi-jin. Pil-young had become a popular presidential candidate, hiding the dark secrets of his past and the family he abandoned. Unfortunately, Yun-sin was seriously ill and could only stay in the hospital. That night, Hae-sung's consultant contacted her and told her about a secret party that was going to happen. Originally, the party was only for the upper class, and Hae-sung wasn't on the guest list. However, Yoo-sun personally invited her. Knowing that Yuhi would be there too, Hae-sung agreed to attend. On that evening, a masked party took place, filled with wealthy and elegant guests. Yoo-hee caught the eye of almost every man with her beauty, but she was focused on one particular man. Each guest was given an ID for identification, like Hyung-ju, who was a top-tier member, received the ID Zeus. However, Yoo-sun had swapped their IDs. Zeus was not Hyung-ju but someone named Cho Sub-jin, and Hyung-ju got the ID Hermes. This was done so that Hyung-ju wouldn't be recognized based on his wealth. If a girl approached him, it might be because she genuinely liked him. At the party, Yoo-sun introduced herself and kicked off the secret gathering. Yoo-hee suspected that Zeus was Hyung-ju, so she went up to him and started dancing in front of him. Meanwhile, Hae-sung also spotted Yoo-hee because of the tattoo on her back. At that moment, Hae-sung was sitting alone when Hyung-ju approached her. They chatted about their jobs. Hae-sung is a teacher, and Hyung-ju works as a game developer. A little while later, Sub-jin joined their conversation. However, their talk was short-lived because Sub-jin got pulled away by a woman interested in him. Similarly, Yoo-hee quickly got close to Hyung-ju. The moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. They would all remove their masks, introduce themselves, and share their professions. Yoo-hee went first, followed by Hae-sung. After introducing herself, Hae-sung mentioned that she had a specific reason for coming to the party. She wanted to uncover the truth about something, particularly a woman who had taken everything from her. However, before she could mention the woman's name, two people interrupted her. Surprisingly, they were still married and had attended the party without knowing each other, causing a scene before quickly leaving. The party became chaotic for a while. Afterward, Yoo-sun approached Hae-sung and invited her to her office for tea the next day. Outside the building, Yoo-hee had plans to seduce Zeus, but she ended up targeting the wrong person. The person she thought was Zeus turned out to be the one who had turned her down during the party. This made Yoo-hee really mad. She not only picked the wrong guy but also came close to getting caught doing something wrong in front of everyone. The party didn't just bring together strangers. It also reunited former lovers who had been apart for a long time. It turned out that Sub-jin and Hae-sung had split up because Sub-jin had gone abroad for his studies without clear communication, and their relationship fell apart. Hae-sung had ended up marrying someone else. On the other hand, we meet a woman named Hyo Jung-in. She used to be Hyung-ju's wife, but they got divorced because Jung-in had an affair while Hyung-ju was abroad for 6 months. Although Jung-in apologized for her mistake, Hyung-ju couldn't forgive her for the affair. According to the party rules, after the event, they could pick someone they liked online. Surprisingly, Hyung-ju chose Hae-sung. A little later, Hae-sung entered the room and told everyone about Yoo-hee's wrongdoing. It turned out that Yoo-hee had been a lawyer at her husband's office, helping to cover up his corruption. She had trapped her husband and falsely accused him of extortion and harassment. Hae-sung asked Yoo-sun to remove Yoo-hee from the member list because she saw her as a threat. However, Hae-sung didn't have a clear plan for exposing Yoo-hee. Even if Yoo-sun kicked Yoo-hee out, there were many other matchmaking agencies she could join. Yoo-sun advised Hae-sung to be stronger and face her destiny with resilience. On that day, Yoo-sun met with Hyung-ju at his home and shared the online election results. Initially, Hyung-ju had chosen Hae-sung, but she hadn't picked him. Instead, Yoo-hee had chosen him. Hyung-ju was puzzled because Yoo-hee had been distant at the party and had only shown interest in Zeus. To be sure of his choice, he wanted to meet Yoo-hee in person, and also the person who had piqued his curiosity, Zeus. In his office, Sub-jin was already waiting for Hae-sung in his office. They had an awkward conversation, with Sub-jin asking why Hae-sung had attended the masked party. Hae-sung then shared what had happened to her husband and who was responsible. She also asked Sub-jin to stay away from Yoo-hee because of it. On that evening, Yoo-sun set up a meeting between the members who had chosen each other. This brought Yoo-hee together with Hyung-ju and Hae-sung with a dentist. Hae-sung initially didn't want to go to the meeting because she hadn't picked anyone. But later, she decided to give it a try. Hyung-ju reluctantly agreed as well, especially after Yoo-hee had ignored him at the party. The guy matched with Hae-sung behaved poorly. He even booked a hotel room for the two of them, which Hae-sung firmly declined. She called Sub-jin for help, and he hurried to the location to support her. Afterward, they had a drink together, and Sub-jin opened up about his painful past. He shared that his father used to physically abuse his mother when he was a child, and his older brother often stepped in and also suffered his father's anger. Unfortunately, his brother had passed away in an accident, and not long ago, His mother had followed her eldest son in death. So-jin had never shared this with Hae-sung when they were dating because he didn't want to burden her with his past. At that moment, Hae-sung noticed that Yoo-hee and Hyung-ju were also present. She wanted to warn Hyung-ju, but she was too late. On that day, Hae-sung got some really bad news. She was fired from her job as an assistant professor, and they didn't even give her a good reason for it. The professor thought it had something to do with the clash she had with Yoo-hee, who actually recommended her in the first place. However, behind bad news, there's always some good news. Hae-sung ended up becoming a private tutor for Hyung-ju's son, Lee Jun-ho. At first, Hae-sung made a promise to herself that she wouldn't let Yoo-hee take advantage of Hyung-ju like her husband did. But as time went by, Yoo-hee and Hyung-ju got closer. They even went on a second date, and Hyung-ju gave Yoo-hee a fancy diamond ring. Meanwhile, Hae-sung was busy teaching Jun-ho. Jun-ho had big dreams of becoming a doctor, even though his dad wanted him to study business and take over the family business like his grandfather. After their date, Yoo-hee dropped Hyung-ju off at his place and saw Hae-sung leaving his house. She got all suspicious about it. Hyung-ju explained that Hae-sung was just tutoring his son, but Yoo-hee accused Hae-sung of trying to seducing wealthy men for their money. Hyung-ju got all worked up too and accused Hae-sung of pretending to be a tutor just to get close to him. Hae-sung was not having it and told them that as a mom of the kid, she'd never do anything to embarrass her daughter. Then she said goodbye and made it clear she'd only tutor Jun-ho until his exams were done. On that day, something big went down. There was this important meeting between two companies, and So-jin decided to buy some shares in Hyung-ju's company. Right around the same time, Yoo-hee had her own game plan. She wanted to join Hyung-ju's company as their legal advisor. As we know from some time ago, Go-aran promised to release land for Yoo-sun if her daughter could marry Hyung-ju. So during this meeting, Yoo-sun showed Jung Mi-jin's profile to Yoo-hee. They cooked up a plan for Hyung-ju and Mi-jin's first date. Their meeting was a bit different from typical couple stuff because they decided to meet up at a racetrack. Meanwhile, Yoo-hee easily got the job as the legal advisor at Hyung-ju's company. That evening, Hyung-ju and Yoo-hee were supposed to play some golf together. But Hyung-ju got tied up somewhere else and couldn't make it. After their meeting, Hyung-ju admitted that he enjoyed meeting Mi-jin. He liked how she was all calm and classy, which was a change from Yoo-hee's style. So they set up a second date. Unlike Yoo-hee, Yoo-sun introduced Mi-jin to Hyung-ju's mom, Mrs. No. Meanwhile, Mrs. No had never even met or heard of Yoo-hee. On that same day, Jun-ho got some awesome news. He got a perfect score on his Korean language exam, and Hae-sung was happy to hear it. Even Mrs. No thanked her for her hard work. Actually, Mrs. No really liked Hae-sung, and so did Jun-ho. She was like the mother figure he'd been missing in his lives. However, there is an agreement between Hae-sung and Hyung-ju. She said she'd stop tutoring Jun-ho once he finished his exams. When Hyung-ju saw how sad his mom and his son were about it, he decided to ask Suk-jin about Hae-sung to clear things up. He wanted to know if the stuff he heard from Yoo-hee was true. Suk-jin told him that Hae-sung wasn't trying to chase after another guy. She got signed up with Rex matchmaking agency against her will, and she only went to that masked party for a specific reason. That evening, Hae-sung got a call that shook her up. The caller told her that her house had been sold off in an auction, and she had to leave her home. Turns out, it was all Yoo-hee's doing. She pulled some shady move under her company's name to seize Hae-sung's house. Hae-sung then decided to confront her about it. At first, Yoo-hee thought Hae-sung would beg her to stop the lawsuit, but Hae-sung was ready to take legal action against her. She realized that giving up easily had caused her husband's death, so now she was ready to fight to uncover the truth. On that same day, Hyung-ju invited Hae-sung over to his place. They had a fancy meal set up for her. Hyung-ju wanted to say sorry for wrongly accusing Hae-sung without any proof. He also asked her to come back, at least for Jun-ho's sake. Ever since she left, Jun-ho had been really upset. It was like he lost a mother figure for the second time. Then, Hyung-ju asked Hae-sung what she had wanted to say at the masked party. She talked about the stuff that had messed up her family because of a woman's actions, but didn't mention that woman's name. She used to want to tell about Yoo-hee to Hyung-ju, but now she knew it wouldn't be easy to confront Yoo-hee. Even though she wanted to take her down, she needed a solid plan to do it. On the flip side, Yoo-hee went to have a chat with Choi Yoo-sun. Turns out, Yoo-sun already knew about the blind date setup between Hyung-ju and another woman. But she tried to dodge any blame and put it on Yoo-hee, saying she shouldn't have accepted Hyunju's ring so quickly because, in her opinion, the ring was some sort of test. Yoo-sun warned Yoo-hee that the person she should be keeping an eye on was Hae-sung because she was the only woman who could freely come and go at Hyunju's place. A similar thing happened with Hae-sung, where Hyunju tried to make amends by buying her a fancy car. However, Hae-sung, who didn't expect anything like that, turned down his offer. Yoo-hee couldn't stop thinking about what Yoo-sun had said. She messaged Hyunju and asked to meet up, but he ignored her messages. When Junho got back from school, he seemed like he had noticed something. That night, Hyunju reached out to Hae-sung, saying that Junho hadn't come home, and they couldn't reach him on his phone. Hae-sung rushed to find him and discovered Junho sitting by the roadside. As it turned out, what Junho had seen earlier was his mom. She had asked him to come over to her place, but he had seen her looking happy with another man, so he didn't want to disturb her happiness. Since Hyunju wasn't responding to her messages, Yoo-hee went straight to his house. There she gave back the ring Hyunju had given her, and told him she wasn't into material things. Hyunju got the wrong idea, and Yoo-hee ended their romantic relationship. Now they were just regular friends. Things were tough for Hae-sung as she was about to lose her house. To get a new place, she had to sell her only car and start taking the bus. One day, she went to visit a man in prison. This guy was one of Yoo-hee's victims. Yoo-hee had taken advantage of him and drained his money, and then she falsely accused him of all sorts of things. Hae-sung asked him to help expose Yoo-hee's wrongdoings, but he didn't want to get mixed up in a fight with Yoo-hee. That night, Hae-sung and Min-ji packed their stuff because they had to leave their apartment soon. Hae-sung didn't even know where they were going to move. Just then, Yoo-hee showed up and made an offer. She said she'd drop her lawsuit if Hae-sung agreed to stay away from Hyunju. But Hae-sung had more self-respect than fear, so she turned down the offer. Just when things seemed hopeless, Seo-jin suddenly showed up. He bought Hae-sung's house, which had been auctioned off earlier. Now the house was his, and he gave it to Hae-sung and her daughter. Hae-sung was really grateful for his help. One day there was a seminar happening at a hotel. Jang Mae-jin, Seok-jin, and Hae-sung were there to share their ideas. Hyunju was kind of impressed when he saw this. Turns out, Hae-sung was not just a great teacher, but also a smart and talented lady. After the seminar, the three of them hung out and had a chat. Meanwhile, Yoo-hee was watching them from a distance. When Hae-sung noticed her, she pulled Yoo-hee over to join the group. All five of them had attended that masked party before, and somehow fate brought them together at different times and places. Seeing them all together, Hae-sung decided to tell them about what she should have said at the masked party. She started talking about a woman who had wrecked her family and caused her to lose her husband, and she dropped that woman's name, which was none other than Yoo-hee. Obviously, this revelation was going to tarnish Yoo-hee's reputation in front of Hyunju. Meanwhile, there was a family meeting going on between Go Aran and Mrs. No. A little later, Mae-jin showed up, but she wasn't with Hyunju because he decided not to attend the meeting. Instead, he went to pick up Hae-sung, who was waiting for the bus. At a family funeral, Yoo-hee met up with Pil-young. She showed him the results of a DNA test that said they were related. Although Pil-young claimed Yoo-hee was his daughter, the test didn't back that up. This was a kind of threat from Yoo-hee, especially considering that Pil-young was a popular presidential candidate at the moment. In other words, Yoo-hee had the potential to expose her father's wrongdoings to the public whenever she wanted. On that day, Junho got some more good news. He received a perfect score in Korean language subject, and to show his gratitude, Hyunju invited Hae-sung and her daughter on a vacation. During the trip, everyone could see how close Min-jae and Junho were, and how much Hae-sung cared for Junho. The smiles that had been missing for a while were back on their faces. Afterward, Hyunju tried to give Hae-sung another car as a token of his appreciation for taking care of Junho. But once again, Hae-sung politely turned down the gift. Finally, Hyunju said that she could use the car anytime as long as she continued to tutor Junho. On the other hand, Yoo-hee met Jung-in, who was Hyunju's ex-wife. After a few unsuccessful attempts to undermine Hae-sung, Yoo-hee tried a different tactic. She told Jung-in that her son was getting close to another woman. Yoo-hee also said some mean things about Hae-sung, suggesting that her relationship with Junho was just a ploy to take Hyunju's money. That night, Yoo-sun set up a meeting between Seo-jin and Hae-sung and Hyunju with Mae-jin. The plan was to create some distance between Hae-sung and Hyunju and make it easier for Hyunju to get closer to Mae-jin. This way, Yoo-sun could benefit from the deal she made with Go Aran. Hyunju seemed a bit jealous of how close Hae-sung and Seo-jin were, It's possible that his feelings for Hae-sung had unintentionally grown stronger. But Hae-sung had moved on from her past feelings, even though Suk-jin still hoped they could relive their old moments. After hearing Yoo-hee's manipulations, the next day, Jung-in went to her ex-husband's place. At that time, Hae-sung had just finished teaching Jun-ho. When Jung-in saw Hae-sung, she immediately started blaming her, thinking that Hae-sung was the reason Jun-ho was distancing himself from her. Hyun-ju tried to stop his ex-wife's words and got quite emotional. He even warned Jung-in to never see Jun-ho again. After this incident, Hyun-ju invited Hae-sung for a drink. All this time, he had been trying to forget Jung-in, who had traumatized him to the point where he had never considered marrying again. Hyun-ju then told Hae-sung that if she needed anything, he was there to help. That's when Hae-sung said she needed Hyun-ju's help. A few days later, Hyun-ju invited some people to celebrate his company's success. At the office, Yoo-hee was approached by one of her victims, Myung-woo. However, she teamed up with Myung-woo to set up Hae-sung during the celebration. On that night, there was this huge celebration for Hyun-ju's company. Lots of important and influential people were there. The party started with this fancy drone show that was pretty spectacular. Hyun-ju himself opened the event. He introduced this super rare wine, only 50 bottles made each year, and let the special guests taste it. During the celebration, Suk-jin introduced Hae-sung to his dad for the first time. At first, his dad was happy thinking his son had finally found a close friend. But when he found out that Hae-sung was a widow with a kid, he didn't like the idea of their relationship. However, Hae-sung clarified that they were just friends, not in any special relationship, even though Suk-jin still wanted to marry her. Hyun-ju wasn't too thrilled about their argument. Then, Hyun-ju and Hae-sung started their plan to take down Yoo-hee. Yoo-hee kept provoking everyone by saying that Hae-sung's husband had insulted her. But Hae-sung was ready. She brought the ring her husband had given her to show Yoo-hee. The ring had both Yoo-hee's name and Hae-sung's husband's name engraved on it. Feeling trapped, Yoo-hee still thought Myung-woo was on her side, but she was wrong. Considering everything Yoo-hee did, including getting Hae-sung imprisoned, it doesn't make much sense for Myung-woo to be on Yoo-hee's side. Especially when it came out that Hyun-ju was the one who helped get Myung-woo out of jail, because Hae-sung asked him to do it to bring Yoo-hee down. Hyun-ju asked Myung-woo to tell the truth as a condition for his own release, so he revealed all of the bad stuff Yoo-hee did, as well as what Hae-sung's husband was involved in. At the same time, the police showed up and arrested Yoo-hee on embezzlement charges. After Yoo-hee got arrested, Hae-sung thanked Hyun-ju for his help. But now Hae-sung is a bit lost about what she really wants in life. Turns out just seeking revenge isn't enough to find peace. Hyun-ju told her it's time for her to be happy, and he wants to be there for her. But Mrs. No doesn't like how close they've become. She'd rather see Hyun-ju with My-jin. To make that happen, she asked Yoo-sun for help in getting them closer, and promised to pay any amount to make it work. A few days later, Yoo-hee was out of jail, which surprised Hyun-ju. He couldn't understand how she got released so quickly. It turned out Go Aran played a part in it, because Pil-young asked for her help to free Yoo-hee. Because Aran is a government official, and she used her connections to make it happen. On the other hand, Hae-sung had a meeting with Mrs. No. Right away, Mrs. No asked her to stop being Jun-ho's tutor, especially after finding out Hae-sung is part of Rex. She got suspicious about Hae-sung's intentions for getting close to Jun-ho. But Hae-sung made it clear that she had no plans of getting close to Hyun-ju or remarrying. Mrs. No needed some time to trust her words, but for now, she wanted Hae-sung to stay away from her family. Afterward, Yoo-sun gave her a call to inform her that Suk-jin would marry Hae-sung, even though Suk-jin's father disagreed. But Hae-sung turned down the marriage proposal because she had no intention of marrying again. The meeting not only informed her about this but also revealed that Yoo-hee had been set free. Hae-sung felt extremely confused, like there was no law for the upper class. After her release, Yoo-hee declared the start of the second round of their battle. It seemed like Yoo-sun's words were also untrue. Suk-jin's father strongly disagreed and even pushed Suk-jin into marrying My-jin. When Hyun-ju found out about this, he quickly met with Hae-sung. He apologized for his mother's behavior and promised to find a way for Hae-sung to become a tutor for his son again. However, Hae-sung turned him down and asked him not to contact her again. She just wanted to continue her life without any worries. She would remember Hyun-ju as the guardian angel who helped her in her tough times. On that day, Yoo-hee had a meeting with her father in his office. She thanked Pil-young for helping her, which Might have been the first time her father had ever assisted her in her whole life. But Pil-young made it clear that it was a one-time thing, and he didn't want to continue their relationship. He considered them strangers again. Yui reminded him about the upcoming elections and the potential disaster if his wrongdoings were exposed to the public. She asked her father for help in ruining Hae-sung. Not only that, she also enlisted the assistance of her business associate, Choi Sung-jae, to destroy Hae-sung and take over her company. Yuhi's revenge had officially begun, and her first target was Myung-woo. On the same day, Hae-sung started teaching her first mythology class. Strangely, both Hyung-ju and Suk-jin were present as participants. After the lecture, Hyung-ju approached her, inquiring about her well-being and inviting her to dinner. Then, out of the blue, Suk-jin joined them. Maybe Hyung-ju had some past issues with forming relationships with women, but he had to admit that he had fallen for Hae-sung. And now, both of these men had their eyes on the same woman. That night, Yui had a secret meeting with Sung-jae and Jung-in. It turned out that Jung-in had been having an affair with her husband's friend. During the meeting, they agreed to team up with Yui to take control of Hibble. On another note, Yong-won continued to pressure his son to marry Mi-jin, offering to leave all his wealth to Suk-jin since he was his only son. His father's only request was for Suk-jin to marry a girl with a good background and family. However, Suk-jin hadn't given his answer yet. Meanwhile, Yoo-sun suggested that Suk-jin could marry Hae-sung, and she would handle Hyung-ju. However, this came with a condition that all of Suk-jin's inheritance would ultimately end up in her hands. As usual, in the morning, Hae-sung made breakfast for her daughter, and after a warm hug from her mother, Min-jae went off to school. On the television, there was news of Myung-woo's death, who was found dead in a river. The news portrayed Myung-woo as someone who had done something terrible. He had sent a message to the news station before his death, revealing that he had been forced to testify falsely against Yoo-hee by Hyung-ju. This statement led to criticism of Hyung-ju by public and caused a significant drop in his company's stocks worldwide. In a board meeting, Hyung-ju was asked to step down temporarily until the situation calmed down, and they decided to appoint Choi Sung-jae as the interim replacement. Upon hearing this news, Hae-sung wanted to meet with Hyung-ju, but she was stopped by Ho-chan, who said that Hyung-ju was currently very busy. The following day, Hyung-ju had a meeting with Pil-young, who was a highly influential figure. Hyung-ju pleaded for his help to prevent the companies that had invested in Hibble from withdrawing their shares. Pil-young agreed to assist him, but he had one condition. Hyung-ju must marry Yoo-hee. Pil-young believed that by marrying Yoo-hee, Hyung-ju would appear to be addressing the core issue, and Pil-young's position would remain secure. Just then, Yoo-hee arrived and proposed working together to improve the situation. She also handed him an envelope containing something important. Later, Hyung-ju rushed to Jung-in's house and forcefully entered. He was determined to uncover Jung-in's affair, which, as it turned out, was a friend of Hyung-ju himself. Feeling like his life was falling apart when he returned home, his mother once again arranged a marriage for him with Mi-jin, despite knowing her son was in a difficult situation. Out of respect for his mother, and somewhat reluctantly, Hyung-ju met with Mi-jin. During their meeting, Mi-jin suggested that Hyung-ju propose to her, and she could possibly help improve his situation. However, Hyung-ju explained that he was already in love with someone else, unlike Mi-jin, and he didn't see marriage as a union based on love. To him, marriage was more like a business partnership. On the other hand, Suk-jin intentionally visited Hae-sung's house to give a birthday present to Min-jae. However, this birthday was not a joyful occasion. Hae-sung received news that Min-jae had been in an accident. At that moment, Min-jae was still in a coma, and her injuries were quite severe. The doctor explained that if Min-jae didn't wake up within 2 weeks, they might have to give up hope. On that evening, Yoo-sun paid a visit to Hae-sung. She mentioned that Min-jae was fortunate because the driver hadn't executed the crime properly. Yoo-sun then showed Hae-sung a photo as evidence, revealing that Yoo-hee had paid a man to cause the accident. Earlier, Hae-sung had encountered the drowsy driver, who had claimed he was very tired while driving at the time. Concerned about Min-jae's condition, Hyung-ju rushed to the hospital to see her. He offered to help uncover the person responsible for the accident, but Hae-sung declined, not wanting to drag him into her problems. By chance, Hyung-ju saw the photo provided by Yoo-sun and realized Yoo-hee's involvement. He enlisted the help of his subordinates to gather evidence against Yoo-hee and then confronted her. Yoo-hee tried to dodge the accusations, claiming the man was her client, but Hyung-ju was determined to make her face the consequences. Yuhee then contacted her father, and their conversation revealed that Aran had framed Yuhee to facilitate Maijin's marriage to Hyungju. Pil-young was furious about Aran's unilateral decision, and secretly, Aran was also leaning toward Hae-sung's side. They faced a dilemma. On one hand, if Pil-young didn't support Yuhee, his position could be in jeopardy. On the other hand, Aran was eager to arrange a marriage between her daughter and Hyungju. Moreover, now that Hyungju had discovered the truth, Yuhee's crime would likely be exposed sooner or later. They had to decide who was the greater threat between Hae-sung and Yuhee. At the hospital, Hae-sung and her mother received good news. Min-jae had regained consciousness. Hyungju, who had been observing from a distance, also shared in their happiness. However, a few days later, Hyungju received more bad news. Some of his company's assets were being seized due to tax evasion in an investment agreement involving Hibble and another company. Upon hearing this, Hae-sung reached out to Yusun and agreed to the conditions offered. She would marry Seok-jin, but in return, she wanted Yuhee to be prosecuted. Yusun confirmed their agreement, but Hae-sung asked for a few days to make her final decision and requested that Yusun keep their conversation confidential. Later, Hae-sung and Seok-jin had a meeting. Hae-sung asked for Seok-jin's support for Hyungju because she couldn't bear to see him suffer alone. Then, unexpectedly, Hae-sung made a proposal to Seok-jin, even though she wasn't sure if they could be as happy as they were in their past relationship. But Seok-jin didn't mind, even though Hae-sung's heart now belonged to someone else. According to him, he was determined to win her back. Back at her home, Hae-sung received a USB drive. Previously, she had gone to recover data from a broken phone, and now that data was stored on the USB drive. Inside, there was a video recording where Yuhee revealed her true identity, including her father's identity and all of his wrongdoings. Finally, Hae-sung had concrete evidence that Yuhee was the abandoned child of Pil-young for over a decade. That evening, Seok-jin visited Hyungju at his office to share the news that he and Hae-sung were planning to get married. Hyungju was taken aback by this revelation, and initially he found it hard to believe. However, Seok-jin insisted that there was nothing more Hyungju could do for Hae-sung at the moment. Hae-sung's life was slowly falling apart, all because of one woman, starting with the loss of her husband and child. Now, all that remained was to witness her further downfall. Seok-jin suggested that if Hyungju truly loved Hae-sung, he should let her go for their own well-being. The following day, Hae-sung gathered her courage and went to see Pil-young. She told him that she had evidence that could potentially destroy his career. She demanded that Yuhee face the consequences of her actions, and threatened to expose this evidence to the media if justice wasn't served. However, Hae-sung didn't reveal the video recording as proof, so Pil-young considered her threat to be empty. Coincidentally, Yuhee arrived at the same location. Hae-sung had previously warned Yuhee not to disturb her daughter, and now she was determined to bring down Yuhee and her father. Pil-young's resolve wavered upon hearing Hae-sung's threat, and he asked Aran to handle the situation. On another day, Hyungju met with Hae-sung and opened up about his feelings. He admitted that seeing Hae-sung and Min-jae always made him happy, and he had hopes of Min-jae becoming his daughter someday. However, considering all the hardships Hae-sung and her daughter had endured, it was clear that this wasn't the kind of happiness he wished for them. They bid each other farewell and wished for each other's happiness. Back at her home, Yusun questioned why Yong-won had chosen to give his entire inheritance to Seok-jin instead of her, despite her 15 years of service. Yong-won explained that it was because Yusun had failed in her attempts to match Seok-jin with Maijin and instead had paired him with Hae-sung. Then, unexpectedly, Yusun's true intentions came to light. It turned out that she had been scheming to secure Yong-won's wealth all along. Just like his previous wife, Yusun had endured abuse and insults to achieve her goal. Upon hearing this revelation, Yong-won couldn't control his emotions, leading to a heart attack. Meanwhile, Hae-sung was reaching out to a journalist named Jang Pil-won. She had previously sent him an email. On her way home, she noticed a car had been following her for a while. Eventually, the two cars forced her to stop. Back at her family's place, concern grew as Hae-sung hadn't returned home late into the night, and her phone was unreachable. Hyungju was also there to help, and it became clear that the kidnapper was Aran. She sent some photos and a video to Pil-young and heartlessly destroyed the car with Hae-sung inside. The video was also sent to Yuhee, and Pil-young demanded that Yuhee never show her face in front of her again. Until morning, Hyungju hadn't received any information about Hae-sung's whereabouts. Then suddenly, Hae-sung sent a message to his phone. That night, Hyung-ju invited Yoo-hee to meet him. He had prepared a room for a press conference and planned to announce his marriage to Yoo-hee. Hyung-ju had even arranged clothes for Yoo-hee. It was like a dream for her, a sudden marriage proposal with everything already set up. In front of the journalists, Hyung-ju began the press conference and revealed the news about Pil-young's crimes and corruption. The shocking part was when it came to light that Pil-young had a daughter out of wedlock, Jin Yoo-hee. Even more startling was the allegation that Pil-young was involved in an attempted murder, with Yoo-hee as his accomplice. The news of their impending marriage left Yoo-hee trembling, and the same went for Pil-young upon hearing the news. Additionally, there was a video recording of Pil-young on that night. Aran entered the room and revealed a startling fact. She had previously warned that Yoo-hee was their biggest threat, but Pil-young had ignored it and considered Hae-sung his main threat. Suddenly, Hae-sung appeared. Earlier, Aran had informed Hae-sung that she had been asked to kill her. However, it was too late because Hae-sung had already handed over the video recording of Yoo-hee to the journalist. Even if Hae-sung died, Pil-young's corruption would still be exposed. With Hae-sung's death, the police would conclude that Pil-young was involved, and that's why Aran saved herself from destruction. Actually, only Pil-young could have stopped Yoo-hee, but he let his lust for power blind him, allowing Yoo-hee to manipulate him. All the hard work he had put into building his life crumbled in an instant. Pil-young found himself arrested on suspicion of murdering Hae-sung and obstructing justice. Amidst the news about presidential candidate Pil-young and his daughter, a high-class matchmaking agency called Rex also faced scrutiny. On the other hand, Hae-sung, who had emerged victorious twice in their battle, met Yoo-hee in prison. Surprisingly, Hae-sung felt a hint of sympathy for her. She realized that Yoo-hee's actions were driven by resentment for her father's past actions, which included abandoning her and her mother. It was this deep-seated bitterness that had pushed Yoo-hee to fight for survival all these years. However, beneath it all, Yoo-hee couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment because she had finally achieved her lifelong goal of destroying Pil-young, even if it is not in the way she had originally planned. The revenge she had sought was also shared by Choi Yoo-sun for 15 long years. Yong-hwan had often subjected her to abuse, insults, and inhumane treatment. Nevertheless, Yoo-sun had endured it all with the intention of eventually taking everything away from her husband. The following day, a wedding took place, leaving the invited guests in awe. At first, it appeared to be the wedding of Seok-jin and Hae-sung, but in a surprising twist, it turned out to be Hae-sung and Hyung-ju's wedding. Seok-jin gracefully allowed the person he loved to marry the one she loved. Moral lesson from the story is, don't mess with people's lives and try to manipulate others, or you might end up getting caught in your own web of lies and deceit.